Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're focusing on something that sits right at that tricky intersection, where stunning tech meets, well, deep psychological unease sometimes. We're talking about those tiny movements, a blink, a twitch, maybe a slight furrow of the brow, things so small they can make the difference between, like, amazing science and something else, something unsettling. So our mission today, a real deep dive into these ultra-lifelike facial robotics. We're going to unpack those mesmerizing, maybe sometimes disturbing demos from companies like AheadForm, specifically their Origin M1 head. And it's not just the hardware we're looking at, it's the ethics, right? It's the questions that pop up the instant a really realistic robot face looks back at you and reacts.
Exactly. That reaction is really the heart of it, isn't it? What happens when this tech perfectly mimics human micro-expressions, those tiny millisecond signals we all use constantly? How does that realism actually change our trust, our perception? We've looked at sources from LiveScience covering that viral reaction, plus the tech specs from AheadForm itself, and some key research on effective computing, places like Columbia University.
Okay, let's start with us then. Why is the human face so potent? It's more than just features, right? It's like you said, a social microphone. Micro-expressions, these rapid bursts of info reward our attention. They tell us friend or foe, happy, sad, confused, faster than words ever could.
Yeah, and that's deep biology. Social neuroscience shows these rapid cues, a quick brow lift for interest, pupils dilating, maybe a tiny frown you barely see. They're incredibly powerful. They kind of bypass our thinking brain and hit those empathy triggers, those mirror neurons, immediately, that immediate reaction. That's basically the whole idea behind effective computing, building systems that don't just crunch data but participate socially.
So if our brains are hardwired to pick up on these signals instantly, then a robot's face isn't just decoration. It's the interface for human feeling. It's like the UX of empathy.
And that's exactly why the AheadForm Origin M1 feels so compelling and, maybe a bit alarming too. This Chinese company put out a robot head that went viral precisely because it nailed those subtle dynamic things. It wasn't just moving, it was reacting. Smooth blinks, tiny twitches that seemed almost unconscious, gentle nods that felt responsive. It really crossed a line that seemed like only CGI could before.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics. When you watch that video, what's actually going on under the skin to make that happen? It can't just be a few simple motors.
Oh, it's way beyond simple motors.
Right.
It's a whole different level of engineering, that realism.
Yeah.
It totally depends on miniature hardware. The Origin M1 uses dozens of these things called micro-actuators. They're like sophisticated replacements for the old, clunky servos. AheadForm specifically says they use around 25 brushless motors under that synthetic skin.
25. Wow. That's a lot packed in there. And are these brushless motors? Is that detail important? Why not just use standard ones?
That detail is absolutely critical. Brushless motors give you much better torque and efficiency for their size, sure. But the real key is the incredible precision and speed control they offer. If you used standard motors, the movement would look jerky, probably be noisy, and just couldn't replicate that organic, subtle speed up and slow down of a real muscle twitch. We're talking micro expressions here, movements that might last less than half a second. Only really precise actuators can handle that speed and fluidity at the same time.
Right. It sounds like running this tiny, silent, perfectly coordinated machine constantly.
Exactly. And it's more than just the movement. The Origin M1 has this whole perception reaction loop built in. It's got high-res cameras in the eyes, multiple microphones. So this sensory input lets it perceive its environment, like where you're looking, the tone of your voice, and then react accordingly. It's that combination, the sensing, the microactuation, and the complex animation programs that tricks our human brains into feeling like the face is actually alive.
It's fascinating tech, but it's still a prototype, right? We're not going to see this checking us out at the grocery store next week.
That's correct. The Origin M1 is explicitly described as a high-fidelity prototype. It's meant for research, for displays, for advanced robotics labs. Think of it as foundational work, really paving the way for future customer interactions and embodied AI research.
Okay, so this is where we move beyond just the hardware, the nuts and bolts, and into the intelligence side, the software, the timing. Because making a muscle twitch is one thing, but knowing when it should twitch, that's totally different. Getting those really convincing human-like expressions needs those precise actuators, yes, but also sophisticated control algorithms, choreographing everything down to the millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
And then that third piece, the perception models deciding when to blink or not. Researchers call this embodied effective control, right?
Right, embodied effective control. Let's break that down a bit. It's essentially the system deciding the right nonverbal response based on what's happening in real time. So if you lean in closer, the effective control might dictate, say, a subtle head tilt, or maybe the eyes widen slightly, just to signal engagement. The robot isn't just running a script. It's dynamically adjusting its facial state based on your state.
So the timing really is everything. A blink that's just a fraction too late feels fake, maybe even creepy. But if it can anticipate, then it builds rapport.
And the research here gets incredibly specific. Take Columbia University's Emo robot project. This robot was actually trained using AI to anticipate a human smile, not just react after it happened. It could predict a person's smile about 839 milliseconds before the smile fully formed on their face.
Wait, hold on. Nearly a full second before. So the robot is starting to smile back at you while your own muscles are just beginning to move.
Precisely. And that near-synchronous anticipatory response, it made a huge difference in rapport during the experiments. It shifted the interaction from just command response to something that felt psychologically in sync, like dance partners who somehow know the next move before it happens. Anticipation might just be the secret sauce for making interactions feel genuinely intelligent and connected.
But how do they actually program the difference between, say, a polite, maybe forced smile and a genuinely happy one? That seems incredibly complex.
Well, they lean heavily on the science of facial mapping. Researchers use something called the Facial Action Coding System, or FACS. It basically maps every individual muscle movement as an action unit, or AU. Think of AUs as like the alphabet of facial expression. A subtle inner brow raise, that's AU1, raising your cheeks. AU6, a dimpler movement. AU14.
Ah, okay. So they're composing expressions almost like chords in music, combining different AUs.
Exactly. A polite, maybe less genuine smile often just uses AU12, that's the lip corner puller.
No.
But a real spontaneous Duchenne smile, the one showing true joy, that has to combine AU12 with AU6. AU6 is that cheek raise that causes the little crinkles around the eyes. And studies are confirming now that advanced androids can produce recognizable, complex emotions using these precise AU combinations, all driven by those, 25 micromotors.
It's always the crinkle around the eyes, isn't it? That's what tells your brain, okay, this feels real. If a robot can nail that perfectly, those tiny movements become incredibly powerful. They can build trust, or maybe delusion.
Which brings us right to the other side of the coin. That power, it cuts both ways. The very same things that build empathy, the precise timing, the right AU combinations can flip really fast into serious unease. We're talking about the famous, maybe infamous Uncanny Valley effect.
Right, the Uncanny Valley. We hear that term a lot. But what exactly is triggering that feeling of wrongness when people watch something like the AheadForm videos?
Fundamentally, the Uncanny Valley is about conflicting signals. When something gets extremely close to looking perfectly human, but there are still tiny subtle flaws, things that violate our deep-seated expectations of what human looks and moves, like our brain flags it as maybe diseased or not alive or just profoundly strange. And the public reaction to the AheadForm demo showed this perfectly. You saw awe, sure, but often immediately followed by words like creepy, zombie-like, or even man-made horror. That gap, that tiny space between almost perfect simulation and actual humanity is really disturbing for us.
So the challenge for designers is immense. They're walking this incredibly fine tightrope. Make the face believable enough to be useful, build trust, communicate non-verbally, but not so perfectly human that it triggers that primal alarm bell in our brains.
Which leads directly into the applications. Because companies aren't just doing this for kicks or pure research. These high-fidelity faces are being pitched for some really critical uses. Think customer service, healthcare support, education, museum guides, even entertainment. These are all places where nonverbal cues, where perceived trust and empathy, they aren't just nice-to-haves, they're essential for the task itself. AheadForm specifically mentions using this Origin M1 tech to boost customer rapport and create these highly embodied voice AI agents.
And you could see the potential for real good there. I mean, imagine a therapy robot, or maybe one for elder care. One that can soften its eyes, lower its brow slightly, show that little cheek raise AU as 6 and 12 together when a patient talks about something difficult, like loss or anxiety. That kind of nonverbal validation. It could genuinely help people feel heard, feel comforted.
Absolutely. But that incredible potential immediately throws up these huge ethical flags, doesn't it? If a machine can mimic empathy so well that it actually generates comfort and trust, we have to be extremely careful about the context. We really need to tackle the risks head on. Risks of manipulation, of collecting sensitive emotional data, blurring the lines around consent, especially when the person interacting with it might be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a point we really need to unpack. If a robot is literally designed to, say, soften its eyes to get more personal info out of you or make you more compliant, isn't that manipulation by definition? Regardless of whether the machine intends anything, the mimicry itself is the tool.
That's precisely the core of the warning from scholars in the field. The issue isn't just whether the machine feels, it's whether it simulates feeling in a way that basically exploits human psychology. And the academic work is pretty clear here. We urgently need guidelines, accountability. Think about it, when these robots are constantly observing facial expressions, listening to vocal tone, they're building an emotional profile of the user. That profile, that's incredibly sensitive data.
So practically then, what are the main calls to action right now? What needs to happen before technology like the Origin M1 really scales up?
Well, the consensus seems to be calling for several specific guardrails. First, explicit disclosure. The robot has to clearly signal when it's simulating emotion versus just, reacting mechanically, no pretending. Second, data transparency is huge. Users need to consent not just to being recorded, but specifically to having their emotional responses profiled. And finally, we need really robust guardrails, especially in sensitive areas like therapy or maybe financial advising, where emotional cues could easily be exploited.
And this raises the big question, where's the regulation on this? Because the tech capabilities seem to be moving way faster than any legal frameworks can keep up.
Oh, absolutely. Policy and regulation are lagging significantly behind what these commercial robots can already do in terms of expressiveness. The debates are really just starting, but we need legal standards soon that address this new kind of emotional interface. Otherwise, we risk this sort of Wild West situation where emotional data gets harvested and used, maybe for commercial gain, with zero transparency.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up by looking ahead. What should we, and you the listener, be watching for next as this whole high-fidelity field develops?
I'd keep an eye on 4 main things. 1, watch AheadForm's next moves, specifically how they integrate the Origin M1 head into full-bodied robots. That's a big step. 2, look out for real-world trials, especially in places like healthcare or museums. We need to see how people really react to this level of realism over longer periods, not just in a viral video. 3, definitely monitor the emergence of actual legal frameworks for emotional AI globally. That's crucial.
And maybe a 4th, more practical one, durability. If you've got 25 tiny motors and complex wiring under synthetic skin, the long-term maintenance and robustness of those micro-actuators, that's a massive commercial hurdle they need to clear before mass adoption seems likely.
That's a very practical, very real challenge. Absolutely. If you tie it all together, these lifelike faces, they really act like a mirror, don't they?
Yeah.
Reflecting back at us just how powerful and maybe how vulnerable our own subtle movements are. They can comfort, they can inform, but they can also deeply unsettle us the moment that tiny movement feels just a fraction off, or maybe too perfect.
It feels like the ultimate expression of AI, maybe.
Yeah.
Not just logical intelligence, but intelligence in social choreography, in understanding us.
So what does it really mean, fundamentally, when a robot can smile back at you and you actually believe it? Are we building companions here, or just incredibly sophisticated tools that mimic connection? And thinking ahead, should future robots even try to look perfectly human, try to cross that uncanny valley? Or is it better if they stay clearly machine-like, keeping that visual line between technology and life sharp and clear?
That really is the question for you, our listener. Do these robot faces, the ones that blink and twitch and seem to listen, do they excite you with their potential? Or do they alarm you with how close they're getting to the human form? Let us know what you think. Stay curious and stay human.